Okay, Patrick, we're back home after spending a good part of our day in Colleton County, just outside the courthouse. We were on the square today, checking out the scene of the Murdaugh trial today as they picked a jury and then started opening statements and completed opening statements. Man, what a unique experience. It's located only about an hour from where our offices are located in Savannah. And we rode over there today. It was my first time in Walterboro. And seeing the scene there was quite something. It was a really dark day, which one of the attorneys, Creighton Waters, for the prosecution, kind of used that in his opening statement. He very animatedly was talking at the end of his opening about how this storm that is Alex Murdaugh was here, that the storm, just like the one outside today, is the storm that killed his family. We got a taste of that today. I know we were getting blown around quite a bit. They did have quite a stormy day up in Colleton. Beautiful little town, and kind of the perfect setting if you were going to create a true crime narrative. I mean, it's like you would set it right in this little quaint, South Carolina low country town with these big live oak trees and these old courthouses and old downtown. It really is a neat scene there. But let's get to it and talk about the opening statements. I think a takeaway today is you're now able to kind of create a scorecard for what you think is in the prosecution's favor and what's in the favor of the defense. And I think if we were going to score this today, we've got about 3 or 4 points for the prosecution, and I think 3 or 4 points for the defense. I know my parents were watching, and both attorneys apparently did their job, because my dad said, well, we watched the state give their opening, and we were like, well, he did it. And then we watched his defense attorneys give their opening, and we were like, well, he definitely didn't do it. So both parties apparently did a pretty good job of getting their cases presented to the jury today. So let's break it down. Pat, I'll let you go first. You want to speak for the state? What did you think were the main points that they were able to score today in that opening statement?
Really, there were 3 main things that I think they focused on that are going to be interesting to see how they play out in the trial. The first piece of evidence that he said that was going to be presented was this Snapchat video that was evidently recorded showing Alex Murdaugh with Maggie and Paul literally about 3 minutes before Paul and Maggie's phones go dead. So they have this Snapchat evidence along with the phone evidence, the location evidence from Google data, and it just goes dead. And that was 3 minutes before evidently Alex Murdaugh was with Paul and Maggie. That's pretty strong evidence for the state. That paints a picture that's pretty hard for Alex Murdaugh's defense to overcome. A second point that the state, I think, had strong evidence or said they're going to present strong evidence on is the murder weapon for Maggie. It was an AR style rifle that they found shell casings around her body, and those shell casings matched shell casings found on the property elsewhere in the garden and at a gun range. This is a very large property where they have, evidently they go hunting and shooting regularly. So there's a lot of firearms on the premises. And the murder weapon for Maggie is one that there is knowledge that Alex Murdaugh had purchased at least one. I think it was 3 of these AR style rifles. And then the same thing with the murder weapon that killed Paul was a shotgun, and the shotgun shells were all around there, and they had plenty of the same brand and caliber of shotgun shells all throughout their property. I think the state had a pretty strong framing of that. He said it was a family weapon was used to kill the family members. And that was a pretty powerful point, I think, if you're sitting in that jury box and you're hearing it framed that way. It puts a real personal, intimate kind of picture. The other big piece of evidence, I think, they found gunshot residue in Alex Murdaugh's car on his seatbelt and in his car. But they also found about a week after the murders, he went to his parents' house and he was seen carrying a blue tarp into the house, and the police discovered a raincoat that was wrapped up inside of this blue tarp, and the prosecution described it as being covered in gunshot residue. So I think those three pieces of evidence are pretty strong if they come out as the state says they will.
Yeah. So basically, you got three main points there for the prosecution. They've got this Snapchat video, number one, that puts Alex Murdaugh right there, right around the time these murders happened, and that contradict his prior statements that he was never there, that he was nowhere near the location.
Which was the dog kennels that were on the property.
Where the bodies were. So that definitely is a huge problem for the state, for the defense, and a huge score for the prosecution. Secondly, murder weapon was just like those that were owned or purchased by Alex Murdaugh, so he had access to these weapons. And number three, there was gunshot residue eventually found in his car and on this piece of clothing that they eventually found, gunshot residue on the inside of the jacket. So those were the three things also that I took away from the state's opening. Okay, so those are the three things for the state. Pretty incriminating evidence, but the defense did a really good job, I think, of pointing out some of the problems with that evidence. Okay, so on the defense side, Dick Harpootlian, Murdaugh's attorney, his point on the Snapchats is that it's actually something that helps in Murdaugh's defense, because in these Snapchat videos, he told the jury that they're going to see somebody who was interacting and laughing with their family members throughout that day, that there were videos that were taken by Paul Murdaugh that have his dad featured in them and his dad's voice in them, and they're casually interacting as a normal family. And this is not somebody who would have just gone from that to turning on his own son and his wife and murdering them just literally moments later. So that the Snapchat evidence also works in favor of the defense, if that's indeed what it's going to show. That would be number one for the defense, I think. Number two is the extreme gruesomeness of this crime scene. Also, ironically, is being something that the defense is spinning in their favor. It's almost as if in the opening statements that the defense attorney was highlighting the sheer gruesomeness of this crime scene. And they pointed out that this son of his was killed. Paul Murdaugh was murdered at point blank range by a shotgun. It took most of his head clean off. There was a lot of really gruesome description of just how horrible this wound was. And that also works in their favor. You've got to believe that this person that was interacting with Paul Murdaugh, his own son, moments earlier, turned around and just blew his head off from point blank range. That's a big leap that you got to get the jury to believe that if you're the state. And they're pointing that out, that this Snapchat video proves that Alex Murdaugh was interacting with his family just moments before he turned on them like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and blew away his own son at point blank range and then gunned down his wife at this crime scene. That's a really with a different weapon,
with a different gun.
To point out, there was clearly a shotgun blast is what killed Paul, and probably a few minutes later or at the same time, there was his wife was found with a different set of wounds from a different type of weapon. So he would have had to grab another gun to kill his wife, and moments later. So that's a high bar for a jury to have to get to. I find that's, for me, one of the most compelling arguments that the defense gave is that, this is not somebody who was stalking this family, who was, seen around fuming, making threats of this family. He was living, a fairly normal life with his family moments earlier before just killing them in one of the most gruesome ways possible. So that's number two. Number three, big one for me, there was no blood on Alex Murdaugh. when he discovered the scene, he's the one that called 911. The cops were interacting with him. It's unclear just how long after the murders, but we're talking within an hour or so of these people being killed. And there was no blood on Alex Murdaugh. No blood anywhere on Alex Murdaugh. Whoever committed these murders would have had blood all over them. This person was killed with a shotgun in point blank range, created massive damage to their body. There would have been blood everywhere. And there was, according to the defense's attorney, there was no blood found on Alex Murdaugh. And the clothing that mentions the gunshot residue on the coat that was eventually recovered, there was no mention of blood on that jacket. There was no mention of blood on that seatbelt. That's a big one for me. And also, he had the type of weapon that was used, but so did a lot of other people. And I think for them, they're going to be really harping on the fact that there was no blood, there was no weapon, and finally, no motive. I think that they're going to really rip into what the state says their motive is going to be. The motive, according to the state, is that he was trying to distract from this horrible financial situation. I think by now everybody knows that, this man did some pretty dastardly things. He was committing white-collar crimes left and right. He was stealing money left and right from clients, etc. And that all of this house of cards was about to collapse on him. And so to distract from that, he killed his family. I just don't know that that's, the type of motive that you want. It seems a little bit of a stretch for me to kill your own son at point blank range with a shotgun to distract from something like a white collar crime that you maybe would get 10 years for tops. To commit capital murder against two people to distract from that. That seems like something the defense is really going to be able to rip into at the end of the day. So those were my three main points. The scorecard for the defense is the Snapchat video actually helps them in a lot of ways, and that the extreme heinous nature of the crime actually helps them because it just seems unlikely based on the way this man was acting just moments before. And we got no blood, no weapon, no motive, no case.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to watch to see how this all turns out. I mean, the state's going to go first in their presentation of evidence. So we get to see starting tomorrow what they're going to put on. And we'll see what kind of case the state has. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that
the top
plays out.
Prosecutor for the state of South Carolina and Creighton Waters against Dick Harpootlian, who is apparently a household name in a lot of South Carolina. He's a state senator and a longtime attorney there, longtime politician. So we're going to see what happens. It'll be interesting to see if these are the same points that are made in closing argument after we've had several days of testimony and evidence that are put in. It will be interesting to go back and look at these and see if these are the same arguments they're making at the end of the day. All right. Well, we'll see what happens tomorrow, Pat. It was fun today. Thanks for driving me up to Walterboro. Had a great time seeing that great community up there. And it was definitely neat to be kind of front and center as this trial of the century is taking place just about an hour away from our office.
Yeah, big trial in a small town, right?
Yeah, big trial, small town. That's a good way to wrap it up. All right. Have a great night.
All right, you too. All right, thanks for listening. If you found this video informative, make sure you hit the like button. And if you want future videos as we do a deep dive into the legal issues that are going to come up in this case, make sure you hit that subscribe button.